Before we get into the films, people are going to want to know this, so I'm curious. When did you first become aware of what Mystery Science Theater 3000 was, and what were your initial reactions to it, if any?
Well, I saw it on, of course, on television. I thought some of the films were so bad, I don't know how they could make them any funnier, but that kind of humor is more Mel Brooks-ish and more different than the kind of humor that I find terribly funny. I never really cared for Mel Brooks stuff. I thought that I liked the Joel. I liked the early Mystery Science Theater 3000s. I thought they were kind of fun and interesting, but I had moved on in my life. That wasn't the kind of entertainment that would really appeal to me. It would have at one time, much younger. I appreciate what they did. I thought that some of the comments were very funny. You know, I licensed through my agent, Corinth Films, a few of the movies for them because, you know, they lent themselves to that kind of lampooning. But honestly, you know, the business is, you know, it's about money also. I mean, they're very generous. They pay a nice amount of money, you know, to use the films. They use a lot of public domain films where they don't pay money, which is, you know, that's the way of it. And I don't have a real, you know, I don't have a dislike for them at all. I think, you know, they've filmed a niche, and I think the one plus thing about it, they keep a lot of these films alive that no one would have ever heard of. You know, you're not going to get syndicators to buy a lot of the stuff they put on there. It would be very difficult to, you know, get the stuff shown on TV. So I think, you know, they have gone into a lot of real old B movies and you know, brought them back, like Beatniks is one, and I don't know, there's a whole bunch of them, but you know, I think that, you know, they filmed a niche, and the shot factories, you know, they're awfully nice people, and you know, that's their thing, and that's what they like to do, and there's a huge audience for it, and I appreciate that. I really do. I mean, how do you mess up Plan 9 from Outer Space or some of those films? I mean, you might only make them better. I don't know, but I really like, you know, the whole concept of it has helped in many ways. You know, a lot of these old B movies that you know you never would have heard of.
We're well aware of The Outlier, in your opinion. We'll get to that one in a moment. But before we get into that, let's start with the first one you licensed for home video, which was The Crawling Eye. Now, did you get that from Medallion, or was that a different distributor?
No, I got that from a guy. Gosh, that's a very early one I owned. A syndicator in Florida. That was an English film called The Trollenberg Terror. Mm-hmm. He had that one. He didn't have many films. He had maybe 3 or 4. I'd have to pull the file and look and find his name, but he had the U.S. distribution rights to that film. But again, he did not have the television rights at the time. I bought the theatrical and non-theatrical rights, and he hung on to the TV rights. Actually, I'm not, without looking at the file, he may have done the license with MST3000 originally. It might not have been me, because I don't believe I own television on it. But I did own rights to it.
I've heard a rumor that the first few that was the first episode, obviously, and I've heard a rumor that the first few episodes they did were things that they thought were in the public domain. I'm not sure if that's true or not. So
I don't know. Since I didn't, it's not. It's copyrighted and renewed. So I mean, I do have the copyright, so it. A lot of people take people's films, especially on YouTube, and they'll upload them and just let people look at them for free. And about 80% of them are not public domain. I mean, they do everybody's stuff. And I have a law firm. We just keep pulling them off, and it ruins your library. You just can't let people, come in and stream your films, and people look at them for free. Why be in the business? It costs a lot of money to make, new masters. And if you make a 4K, now everything's going to have to go to digital 4K. You're looking at $5,000 to $10,000 to $20,000 a picture just to make a restoration of one, and that's black and white. So, you just can't let the YouTube and these people just use your stuff for free. And they all say it's public domain, or that's public domain. It's BS. All you need to do is run a copyright search, the Library of Congress, but they don't bother to do it. And when you pull them down, they don't say they pull them down, but it's just they'll keep them on. And the problem I have with YouTube is the copyrights allow the people that own the films to say when they're exhibited, and even for free or pay or where. And if you own a film, the only way you get revenues is from people looking at it, or downloading, or streaming, or DVDs, or in theaters. I book a lot of these still on film to theaters like the New Beverly, Quentin Tarantino, and the Film Forum in New York, and the Egyptian in Hollywood, and a lot of the fine arts theaters and Revival, even Austin, Texas, and they play your films, and they pay money, and they sell tickets, and if YouTube lets people look at your stuff free, then or download them for free, then it's just like theft. It's just stealing, basically, is what it is. I'm very, very opinionated about public domain. I think it's a license, a license to steal, but it doesn't seem to matter. They'll put up anything. They don't care if it's copyrighted. They put them up until you pull them down, and you can't sue anybody anymore on copyright. It takes 2 years, $50,000 to get back $5. So, you just have to be vigilant and try to. I'm one of 3 of the largest independent distributors in the U.S. that own private libraries and copyrights and intellectual properties, and all of us, the guy that owns the Lippert collection, Kit Parker, he has the same problem, and Alex Kogan at Films Around the World in New York, and Susan Hofheinz, she has a problem with this. She owns 10 pictures from AIP, and it's just a constant battle with the pirates and the bottom feeders, but it's just something you have to do.
I have a friend whose name I'm not going to tell you, and whose name I'm not going to say on the show, who about a week ago went on a really long-winded rant on his Facebook saying how mad he was that Crawling Eye got taken down off his YouTube, saying it was public domain, and I had to break the news to him. No, it's not public domain. Sorry, buddy.
Nope.
Now, the rumor with Crawling Eye is that it was a sequel to a television series that had been produced in England. Is that true?
I am not sure about that. I think it might have been a pilot, or an intended pilot for a television series. I'm not sure. I bought that film way back. I would say, I don't know, I'd have to pull a file and look 30 years ago from the distributor. So I just don't know really a lot about the history of that movie. I know somebody wanted to redo all the special effects in it, and I said, well, I don't own except the U.S. rights. I said, Tempian Films owns, the rights in England, and it's an English film. And by the way, any films in England that were public domain, the copyrights were restored through the GATT Treaty. So there isn't any well, there might be a few, but the producers that own them in England, they can renew the copyrights. Unfortunately, at this juncture, the U.S. distributors of motion pictures that are made in America, and it's not fair, cannot recover copyrights on their properties yet. But hopefully, it will change
in the near future.
Yeah, I hope so, because I can't see Citizen Kane, Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz in 20 years, and all those pictures falling into the public domain. So I'm sure that it goes 95 years now from the date of release. So I'm hopefully that Frank Capra was pretty well broke when he died, because he forgot to pay $10 or however it was to renew the copyright of It's a Wonderful Life and Meet John Doe. And the stinking U.S. copyright 200-year-old law, or however old it is, was made before they had this kind of stuff in music and recorded music. And they just basically, everything prior to 1923, you can't control, you lose it, and because of the United States copyright laws and the whole world, the government basically seizes your intellectual property and gives it free to the world, not just the U.S., the world. It's just unbelievable that people that write music and books and can't leave it to their ancestors, and it's amazing that Disney hasn't been able, and the major studios, to get the public domain laws knocked out entirely, because it's their properties. There was no reason for Frank Capra to die penniless. There's no reason. He had a wonderful library of films, and I've been a great advocate of getting rid of the public domain. And I guess we're getting off to a side, but public domain not only is a theft of people's intellectual property, it also prevents restoration of a lot of the classic public domain films. I have some, and I would certainly stop selling them if the copyright owner, could renew the copyright. And there's no money in them, because everybody has sold them and done about everything they can do to them, and they become pretty well worthless. So, and of course, everybody complains. This is PD, that's PD, this is PD. That's some are, some aren't. But it really aggravates me. I just looked at a picture I just acquired. I won't tell you which one it is. A major studio film, and it's not public domain. It's renewed, and it's on YouTube. And so law firms taking it down, and it comes back up. And how the hell are you going to license this to DVD or some companies, and they're all shown free, downloading or streaming? And I think it's going to change. I hope, because it's just destroying everybody's stuff.
Let's get back on topic. So you did Crawling Eye, and then the next film that you licensed to Shout Factory was Lost Continent, which you've told me is one that you think was underappreciated. What do you remember about Lost Continent?
Well, I saw it when I was 9 years old, and what I remembered I own it, so I've seen it a lot of times now, but the thing I liked about Lost Continent, it was a B movie done by Lippert Pictures, which was, a B studio, but it had excellent effects, for the time, and it looked like a major studio production. It didn't look, like, Untamed Women or one of those movies. It had a lot of wonderful production values, a beautiful music score, and well photographed. And when they got on the mountain in the original film, it all was dyed green. All of the film stock was dyed a kind of a real deep green. So the top of the mountain, it was like Rocketship XM when they got on Mars. It was lavender. So, and on a big screen, the film looked very good, and it was just awfully well photographed. I like the film a lot, always did. It's kind of a forgotten film, really. It's not like Rocketship XM or anything, but I just always thought it was a well-made film. It's one of Lippert's better films. Of course, there's a bunch of V-2 rockets in the beginning. Bob Lippert took that footage and used it again, in that film, which is okay because they didn't change rockets in it, at least. And the dinosaurs, they were stop motion, claymation, or I don't exactly know. I hadn't looked at it that close, but they were convincingly real enough at the time to be kind of scary.
It was better than every other film at that time. The thing I always liked about Lost Continent is that they did that instead of doing what King Dinosaur and Robot Monster and all those other movies did, which is they just bought the million years BC footage.
Oh, I know. I have. Well, I've seen that poor dinosaurs from 1 million BC so much, and they were going to use that in Rocketship XM, according to Kurt Newman Jr. Before the rewrite of the script, they had those ready to be plugged in, and oh my God, when they got on Mars. And so I'm glad that Dalton Trumbo, the writer that rewrote that script, and took all that stuff out. And
Weiss Global, Adrian Weiss, is presumably the ones that sold it to MST in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah. Figured as much.
I now own television. I did not own. He sold that in Rocketship XM. Now I renewed Lost Continent because my agent wanted the money and was begging, to renew it, and it was then we renewed a bunch of them.
The next one you licensed was The Beast of Yucca Flats, the 1961 film. Do you remember who you got that from, and what do you remember about that film?
Well,
if anything,
I remember it was almost unwatchable. I bought it from who was the producer of the movie?
Anthony Cardoza?
Jack Cardoza. Oh God, yeah, Anthony Cardoza. And they shipped all the stuff in here, and I had never seen the film. I don't think it even had sound recording on it. I think it was added later. I think the whole film might have been shot wild. I'm not sure.
You are. That's what I've heard. So
the only reason I bought it is Cardoza kept calling, and he was broke. He says, "I've got this film. It's got the guy from Plan 9 in it, Tord Johnson, and you could go with the Ed Woods." And so I bought it, and Mystery Science Theater, without them, no one would know it. I mean, I doubt if you could get a license anywhere on it. You can, with rare exception, I've not been able to license one film except Plan 9 on Turner Classic Movies, and they've had it, and they want to renew the license. I haven't yet renewed it. Turner Classics, they want to license a whole library. They don't really want to license just one, and except the Plan 9. I had to make them a new print on that for to play at the Chinese Theater on a couple years back. So.
Now, the director of Beast of Yucca Flats was a gentleman named Coleman Francis, and Mystery Science Theater sort of made him a, I guess, household name or a cult name, if you will. He directed 2 other films, Red Zone Cuba and The Skydivers. Did you ever try to get those films? And then I have a follow-up to that as well.
To be honest, I never even heard of them. The only connection I had with him would be through Anthony Cardoza.
Okay. The reason I bring it up is because I think Coleman Francis could have been Ed Wood if either you owned all 3, or Crown owned all 3, or Peter owned all 3. Do you think that that's a valid theory, or do you think I'm just being insane?
No, I'll tell you, I argue with a lot of people on Ed Wood, and whether I'm right or wrong, I think if it had not been for 3 people, that you wouldn't even hear of Ed Wood much today. I think the Medved books were the primary reason. I think that's where Rudy Gray got the idea to do Nightmare and Ecstasy. And I remember when those books came out, the 50 worst films of all times, and then the worst director and all that, the Golden Turkey Awards, that got incredible publicity when those came out on all on all the Hollywood shows and whatever shows were popular back then. And I remember Jay Leno ran every night on the Tonight Show a minute or two of Plan 9 from Outer Space, and I think a lot of Ed Wood fans really dislike the Medved treatment of Ed, and actually Al Doshna is a friend of mine, and he's big into that. He writes for some of my videos, and he and I'll argue from time to time, about how come Ed Wood became popular, and that's, to me, that's how he became popular. And then I got into it, actually, because Jeff Stein, who was producer of The Kids Are All Right, contacted me. He had the project going. It came from Hollywood with Cheech and Chong and that bunch, and that's really what dragged me into it. I wasn't a discoverer of Ed Wood. I think what I had been buying film properties, and nobody wanted that stuff. And I thought, as long as I'm going out and trying to find the owners and who has rights to these pictures, I might as well just buy the rights and then license the clips over to Paramount, which was a fortunate deal because I bought the films. They weren't real expensive. I think the most expensive Ed Wood was probably Bride of the Monster, and because it was owned by an attorney, Sidney Barton, and he died and his estate had it. They thought it was Gone with the Wind. I think that was probably the Ed Woods, the most expensive one. The most expensive one really was Target Earth. I bought Worldwide and Remake and all that on the 1954 Target Earth, and oh boy, I made any money back on that at all. I haven't had it but about 3 years, but I've got to do some new licensing on it. But I'm sorry, I'm
no, it's fine.
I'm getting off track. Put me back on track.
It's a weird theory, and it's a theory that I think I'm the only one that's ever floated. But the reason, again, Mystery Science kind of made Coleman Francis a sort of nerddom name, and I would love to. I don't think it's possible because of the way that. Well, maybe, I don't know, but let me put it to you this way: does the idea of a documentary about the director of Beast of Yucca Flats intrigue you, delight you? You're mad to it?
I would love anybody doing documentaries on any of these films, because there's always, especially films like those, there's always a real interesting story. Now, some of the stuff that I heard from Carducci, from the guy that Beast of Yucca Flats,
Cardoza.
Cardoza. That was his girlfriend. That was in the woman in the movie, and her wife, her girlfriend, and you hear all kinds of stuff. And well, I would love for you to do it, and I would. I've just cooperated with a couple of writers on Robot Monster, and in fact, there's a guy named Rich Silverman in Hollywood that's just written a musical of Robot Monster, and I'm giving him a 2-year license to see if he can get it produced. So, not on film, but on stage. And I think all that stuff. There's really an interest in a niche. The only, and in fact, there's another guy I'm involved with, Patrick Gutov, and he's writing the book on Tom Neal and Tom Neal Jr. on their stories.
You actually brought up Robot Monster, and that's the next one on my list. What are your thoughts on Robot Monster?
Well, again, that's one of the pivotal films I saw when I was like 10 or 11 at the PIC. It never played here in 3D. And I only wanted the poster, and that's how I got in the whole business. What do I think about Robot Monster? I mean, how did they get it made? I mean, was this for real? I mean, when I saw that as a 10-year-old with that dresser and all that stuff. I mean, they were serious as a heart attack.
Yep.
And what I think is so fun about it is the guy that directs Phil Tucker has to be a loony bin. I mean,
but we don't know that.
Were they that naive to think it's just like Plan 9? I mean, here's these paper plates on strings. I mean, do they really think that the person that goes to see a sci-fi movie back in 1956 or whatever is going to buy this? That's. I was very serious, and an astronomer, what I want to be, and very scientific, and read all that stuff. I thought, God, I mean, who are they making these for? And I think kids really, in some ways, growing up back in the 50s, early 60s, were fairly smart. They're probably smarter than some of them today, in science anyway, and were more analytical. In fact, when I would watch the Flash Gordon serials, I loved them, and I own Buck Rogers. I just acquired all the rights to the 1939 serial Buck Rogers from the owners, IVY Films, and got all the negatives here in the last couple months. And I mean, I saw that serial when I was 10 years old on TV. They were running those serials, and it was corny in 1953 or 52 when it was, run on TV. But Buster Crabbe was such a personality, and they were adventurous and very watchable. I don't know if people, what they think of that stuff today. I don't know. I love Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. I almost had Buster Crabbe in a movie for me, and he died about 2 months before we were making it. And I love these films. I just don't know what the future is with them. I mean, I don't feel I own these pictures. I think that most of the guys I know that own libraries, I think we're basically custodians, and I think it's up to us to preserve them and keep them in as good a shape as possible, because they'll go on when you die, and somebody else will have them, and I don't know what the future is for them, really.
I don't either. Although I have a question a friend wanted me to ask you about the idea of a special edition Blu-ray of Robot Monster. But
I absolutely want it out in Blu-ray. I want it out in 3D. I want them all out. It's just I've been the film Robot Monster was licensed exclusively to Image Entertainment until January of this year, and they had a 6-month sell-off period. My entire library I had nothing to do with it for 10 years because it was sub-licensed out. So I just started finding out all the theft and the piracy, so I had to hire a law firm to start going after the pirates. But because my agent, Corinth Films, they didn't police anything. They just licensed them off to Image and let them go. And I'm
thinking they would police them. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would think so. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to police them. They have so many of them, and the piracy got so rampant that you have to just start. You can't stop it all, but you have to sort of stop the hemorrhaging, hopefully. So I've had discussions with several major distributors. Came really close to a license with Kino and then Criterion on a couple, and none of them have gelled at this point. I'm at a standstill on what to do with Invaders from Mars, because that's a very high dollar movie. Sold a lot of those, and I want to put it on 4K, and it's a pretty expensive proposition. But Robot Monster, the 3D, I've got the left and right eye, of course, and the negatives and all. I'd like that out in 3D, but it's still a very expensive proposition to prepare it for 3D. And if you don't have a distributor that, number one, either puts the money up front to do the 3D restoration of it, and the costs of scanning and frame at a time and matching and doing all of that, you could spend $20,000-$30,000 real quick, and if you don't have a distributor, how the hell are you going to get your money back? You can't, run an ad in Film Facts, and we used to sell out of Film Facts on VHS. You're never going to live long enough to get your money back. So you need the whole distribution game is different than when we were doing it with Inglewood 20 years ago. So I'm just learning. Probably a lot of these films, if I don't license them to distributors, I'm going to probably have to, put them back out. But you have to close caption them now. They want high def. I love some of these films in Blu-ray. And in fact, Robot Monster, was going to release in 2D and 3D, and same with Catwomen of the Moon. And I want them out. There's no one come forward to make any kind of a deal, to put them out, that any credible deal. So, but it'll happen. Robot Monster is getting a lot of play and a lot of. It is so absurd. The film is so damn absurd that it's wonderful, and the fact that Phil Tucker tried to commit suicide after reading the reviews is just priceless. And go ahead.
I've heard a rumor that yes, he tried to kill himself, but it wasn't because of the reviews. But maybe that's I think I read through the years that's why he tried. But people write stuff that sounds fun that might not be true. So well, Phil Tucker's really the only one that knows for sure or not, but because he would know why he tried to kill himself, but we'll never know why.
Is he still alive?
I don't think so.
No, I don't believe so either.
I believe he passed away in the 70s.
In the Golden Turkey Awards or the other 50 Worst Films, Robot Monster was first runner-up to Plan 9.
Yep.
As being the worst films of all times. And those are not the worst films of all times. They're extremely entertaining. I think they're maybe the most ignorant films, but I have a lot of this guy that's writing on Robot Monster, 2 or 3 of these guys that have books coming out. They think, I think I'm talking to, they think the guy's Orson Welles, and I thought, well, I'm willing to learn. I don't see it, but, you're telling me something I don't.
The next one I have is Bride of the Monster. We kind of already covered it a little bit. Any kind of final thoughts on Bride of the Monster? Reactions, anything?
Well, all the critics of this film say that was his closest film to being a legitimate, sort of Universal or PRC type of horror film. I read it when I was 12 years old. I had a print of it. And I got that one down here on Film Row with a print of Devil Girl from Mars. I liked the Devil Girl from Mars. It was corny and it was silly, but it had some nice effects. It had the stupidest robot I've ever seen, but it had some nice effects in it, and it was made in England. But Bride of the Monster, I find some of those films difficult to set through. I was glad when it was over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm glad I made it through it. I have some films like that. God, am I going to get through this? One lifetime's not enough.
Yep.
I know the people in Robot Monster pretty well, and knew Dolores very well. And,
Bride of the Monster, you mean? Sorry.
Bride of the Monster.
You said Robot. I was correcting for people listening.
But now I do have the address of the lady in Robot Monster.
She was at a convention not long ago.
Oh, good.
I think so.
She wrote me at one point, and way back, and I know I've got correspondence from her.
The final film, as of now, that you've licensed is Project Moonbase. What do you remember? And that was through Medallion TV, right?
Yeah, no, I got Project Moonbase and Robot Monster through Medallion, and I had TV on that and Robot Monster. Personally, I saw Project Moonbase when it came out in 1953 down at the Regent Theater on 12th Street. Played with, I think, Lost Continent and Rocketship XM. They played on a triple bill, and I saw it. I thought it was, it's a very short film, a little over an hour, and I thought it was well made for what it was. Oddly enough, it's got the same set as Catwomen of the Moon. It's all made in probably the same little sound stage out there. And Jack Rabin, I bought rights from some of those films that NTA had, and Jack Rabin did a lot of the special effects, and Al Zimbalist, who was involved in some of those also. Well, Donna Martell, in fact, we sold her a lot of VHSs. She went to a lot of those Ray Courts things out in L.A. Back when we were selling them on Englewood. I haven't heard anything from her for a long time, but I kind of liked the film. I wasn't aware until later on that it was actually a TV pilot, but it played theatrically. It has a nice trailer to it, has a nice one sheet, has a nice poster, and Lippert did a pretty good job of putting it out in 1953. It was at the height of science fiction, and I think it did pretty well. There was a lot of theaters back then they called grindhouses, and what they are, they're second-run theaters, a lot of them in small towns, and they could rent films for like $5 to $7.50 to $15 for the whole week. That was the film rental, and so that's why a lot of those little bitty B films got a lot of playing time, because in those days you could buy a print for $200. Today it's $4,000, $5,000 35 print, so you could buy prints cheap. You could release a film pretty cheap. The one sheets and stuff were fairly expensive, and the artwork, but and the trailer. But back then, there's a lot of those B movies that were quickies made for $30,000, and that includes the distribution. A lot of them were sold also what they call states rights. There were independent film distributors in a lot of the film rows around the country. And in Kansas City, there was 2 or 3 independent distributors, and they would buy the rights they'd buy prints from producers, and the license would be for the life of the print. When the print wore out, that was it. So they would sell to all these small towns around, like there were theaters in Garden City, Missouri. There was one out in Belton on the second floor. There were just little theaters everywhere in the 40s and early 50s and 30s. So that's why there's a lot of these little movies that got made and were distributed. The drive-ins didn't really hit it big till after World War II, early 50s and on. But there was still a lot of little bitty theaters in small towns that couldn't afford the major studio stuff. And downtown Kansas City, there was 4 or 5 theaters. If you ever go get an old movie ads from the Kansas City Star from the early to mid 50s, you have no idea how many little theaters are around. It played triple bills and double bills, and so I don't know where we were going.
Project Moonbase. Just minor thoughts. You saw it on a triple bill with 2 other.
Yeah, well, that's how I got on all the triple bills, because that was a little over an hour. But
you said you liked the movie.
I liked the movie. I liked it a lot. I thought it was well made. It reminded me of Space Patrol, sort of. Okay. It was, and Tom Corbett. They were. It was kind of serious. One thing I never realized is, have you seen the film
Project Moonbase?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Well, the television screen where they're talking to the lady president and all that.
Yep.
They're really setting back there. It was not a TV screen. They had the sound stage. They were sitting back there on the desk right behind the window. And I don't know, I never never realized that, boy, they have a real clear communication picture with Earth on, in that spaceship, but they were really there. I thought it was fairly well done. In fact, when they were walking upside down, I thought, it's split screen, but I've seen worse, and I don't know what it cost. I don't think that film could have cost over $30,000. Well, I don't know.
It was Lippert, I'm betting no.
With the moonscape and all, that was mostly rear projection.
Yeah. I
don't even think it was matte. I think it was probably a front rear screen projection. I like Project Moonbase. It was written up. The way they promoted those films, those B-movies like Space Ways and that one, and the science fiction magazines that came out, the pulp magazines, like Science Fiction, and I've got a bunch of them. They did stories on them, on the movies in there, and they had short sci-fi stories, and then there was an article, on Space Ways and a lot of those films, and they got a lot of free promotion through Science Fiction magazine. Of course, when Faye started, I think 56 or 5, with Famous Monsters of Filmland, that was a huge magazine in the genre. It was everywhere. You could buy that. I bought that at 85th and Warnell. There was a drugstore, and they had magazines in there, and man, I picked up Famous Monsters of Filmland in there. So that really exploded a lot of that stuff, and it got really going crazy in the 56, the Roger Corman era.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
The advent of Bird-Eye Gordon and Roger Corman.
Oh, poor Bird-Eye Gordon. Ooh.
Still kicking. Now, we're going to move on to it in a minute. We're going to move on to it now, The Outlier. But before we do, there's one rumor I wanted to clear up about it before we get into it being on Mystery Science, which is with Rocketship XM, I just want to clarify on this rumor because I've heard it, but to me it doesn't make any sense. There's a rumor that when theater companies got the film, it said the box was labeled, "This is not Destination Moon." Is that rumor true?
No.
Thank you.
Absolutely not. In fact, on all the paper that I have, and I've got stuff from Box Office Magazine from 1950, and it says Expedition Moon under the title Rocketship XM. It says Expedition Moon on a lot of the posters. Okay,
I've read that everywhere, but it doesn't make sense because Lippert would have owned the theaters, so or he would have had that. It's a rumor that I've heard so much, but the more I think about it, I'm like, there's no way that's true.
No, no, he wouldn't have done that. No.
Okay.
They had They did have a lawsuit.
Yes.
I believe I've got I own Destination Moon. I've got a ton of files on that picture. They did have a lawsuit that was settled on those two pictures. So yes. I don't. It's been so long since I've looked at that stuff. I can't tell you exactly what it was about, but I know I have copies of it I got from George Powell.
You find it ironic that you own both I find it ironic, I don't know if you do, but the fact that you own both Destination Moon and the film that was made in competition with it?
No, because when I started buying those rights, Destination Moon has not always been one of my favorite films. I liked it a lot. I didn't think it had the dramatic appeal, even remotely, that Rocketship XM has. Okay. And I appreciated the Technicolor, and I met Walter Lantz that did the Woody Woodpecker stuff. I went in, it was his office once, and and I knew George Powell pretty well. And I also have another film because I have a assignment on. I've never done. I put it out in VHS, but it's public domain. It's called The Great Rupert. And it's made the same year as Destination Moon. It's about a talking or dancing squirrel. It's a puppet tune kind of movie. And George Powell, unfortunately, when I got the rights from him, he lived in Malibu, I believe it's Malibu, and they had a fire, and it burned up everything he owned, all of his contracts, every underlying contract he had on all those pictures, and you could get a quit claim assignments, from him, but that was about it because he had nothing. It's very sad. He lost scripts, props, drawings. I do have some drawings on Destination Moon he did give me, though. The concepts of the rocket that were drawn up prior to the making of it. But, and the Bonestell paintings are still around, but I don't know if he had any or not. I know Bob Burns has got some. But.
Getting back to XM real quick, you've made it no secret that you do not believe it should ever have been on Mystery Science Theater 3000. What people are going to say before you get into that is, if you didn't feel it should have been, how did it end up on the show in the first place?
Okay. When that thing went on, I didn't know it was on. All right. The first rights I bought to Rocketship XM from Adrian Weiss was theatrical and non-theatrical. He was still licensing the Lippert package to TV only. He didn't want the theatrical and non-theatrical. So I did not own those rights. I only owned theatrical. So Adrian, people complain, like our late buddy, that I don't put stuff on TV. Well, Adrian Weiss, these are all available for TV. Nobody'd buy them. I got a lot of calls, not flack, but from, I will not name the people, but they're fairly well known. Why did you put Rocketship XM on Mystery Science Theater 3000? I said, well, I did not. I don't own the television. And I'm not going to name the people, but they're movers and shakers, and they basically blamed me for putting it on Mystery Science Theater. And, I've made it plain on that home theater blog umpteen times that, I come under severe criticism because there's a lot of people, including myself, that love that picture. It's a landmark sort of space exploration film. It did tremendous business. David Packard, that owns Hewlett-Packard, is one person. It's one of his favorite films of all times. That's how I met the man, and he owns the theater up at Palo Alto, California, a huge theater, and I sold him original nitrate print of that for his archives, and that film has Marty Scorsese has made him a print of it from 35 millimeter, and it's at the Museum of Modern Art stored. And there's just certain films I can't understand why, with all the ridiculous films out there, why that one they would wanted to deal with. I know I don't think Osa Masson knew it was on there. She was kind of, I know she might have been deceased by then.
1990.
I know Hugh O'Brien knew it was on there.
Yep.
I just got a lot of flack, and just like on Invaders from Mars, we didn't have a complete negative, and everybody, you screwed it up. I didn't screw it up. Somebody screwed it up when I was 10 years old. I'm trying to put it back together, but, I totally defend Rocketship XM. It's affected a lot of older science fiction people, whether dramatically it's quite a film, and it's just a beautiful production. How it was that beautiful, everything came together with it. And at the time, people love that picture. They don't dislike it. People love that film like The Day the Earth Stood Still. Day the Earth Stood Still is in a lot bigger place than Rocketship XM. But as far as a B movie exploration, they're different. Rocketship XM is a pretty darn good movie and very entertaining. And the cast, it's a wonderful cast. They're all Hugh O'Brien's first movie, and it's just a film that's, that's one guy said to me, you should have lampooned this film. And I've re-quoted some of the things that people said to me. I said, well, I promise I will not relicense it. I will not let him use it again. You sort of put between a rock and a hard place, and I do agree with the people that don't want it back on there. I mean, the other argument on the other side is, well, it makes people know the film, but the film has been in release constantly since I've owned it. On VHS, DVD, it's played. I've played it in theaters. It's been available on 16 and 35 in the original format, and in the director's cut. The trailer and all. It's been written up in many magazines, been on the cover, and it's just not Robot Monster. That's a lot of fun, and some of those. I was put in that position. I'm not, I'm simply not taking the blame. That's all. on Rocketship XM. What do?
You can't win.
No, believe me, you can't win, Joshua.
Yeah.
You try to do the best you can do. I'm happy that I was able, like on the movie The Flying Saucer, it's a really not much of a movie, but it's the damn one sheet's thrilling, and it was the first film with the title Flying Saucer, and it started the whole beginning of the Cold War, and it's it's kind of like a serial. It's a spy movie, but it came out at that time, and anything with the Flying Saucer. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. The saucer is pretty well done, and there's a model saucer and a full scale one, a little bitty one, and it's just I saw it when I was a little kid. I wanted it to be from another planet, but it wasn't. So, but it was pretty thrilling, and it has an eerie feel to it, and nobody cares much about it, but it was all nitrate. All the negative was nitrate, and it was getting ready to decompose, and nobody really cared about it. It was sold 2 or 3 times, and I did a story for either Starlog or Film Facts on that film. I was the only story ever written on it, and Michael Conrad's widow, the man that made it, and I have his print, actually. He was dead. It's one of those little B movies that has a nice score, actually. It does very long. If you were setting up at night and it'd keep your interest, you'd want to see what's going to happen. So, what can you say? It's probably made in a week. I think these films they're all part of the atomic age culture of the country. It was a unique time to live. I thought everything went to shit about the time Vietnam hit. The magic's gone about everything, and it could be the fact that when you get older, when you're a kid, the magic is still there, or maybe it's just aging, that all the excitement and stuff of being very young and into all this stuff, maybe that's what's gone. I don't know.
I'll tell you this: I'm 24. I'm 24 years old, and I'm so disillusioned by a lot of the things I see in TV and movies, just because I just.
Boy, me too. I would love go back. We lived in Santa Fe Hills in the 50s, in a 50s flat roofed house, and my mom had a 56 Chevy convertible. I went to see the Brain from Planet Eros one at the Boulevard Drive-In with Teenage Monster, and I own them both. Mm-hmm. And who would have thought? I mean, I'm down there looking at wide-eyed this huge movie, and my God, if anyone had ever told me when I was going to see all those that it's possible for a human to, for an ordinary mortal, the outside of the business would have anything to do with these. And geez, Invaders from Mars, I remember so vividly. I saw it at the Uptown. It opened in 4 theaters here, Uptown Fairway, Granada, and the Tower downtown, and it was a pretty big movie. And I remember the very night I went opening night, my mom dropped me off. I went out in front of that, the Uptown Theater down there?
Yep.
Well, that was the same box office. I walked out. They closed the theater. The marquee went off. My mom had to come back to pick me up. And there was a 40 by 60 or 30 by 40 poster of Invaders from Mars, and I was standing, and I was looking up at the night sky, and it was so clear and sharp, and there was the stars. And I look back, and I'm like 11 years old, and here's this poster there with the green guy on it. And I mean, I can't even remember where I sat in the theater, and I just thought it was a terrific movie and very scary. And I was about the same age as Jimmy Hunt when he made the movie. I think back in the 50s, we had, I guess you have superheroes today, I don't know. Superman was a superhero, and you looked up to people, and the animosity wasn't there, and you know, it's just, I just hate the political landscape today, what's going on, and the underhand and the thievery, and it's just, gee whiz, where's this country going? You know, it's nice to live in kind of a fantasy world if you can. I'd like to. I can. I have to wake up every day, and I'm trying to get the Inglewood Theater reopened and get a lot of stuff done. And it's, you know, it's, as you get older, it's more difficult to get everything done the way you want it done.
I know the answer to this. I'm only asking this because people will want to hear it asked. Is there anything that the Shout Factory could offer, say, do, that could convince you to change your mind?
No.
Done and done.
Because
now, go ahead.
You have no idea. You would have no idea. I would have to move. I'd have to move to Syria, I think, if I did it. From the people that are in the business, that are into sci-fi. I mean, not only do I have to contend with guys your age and that adore that thing, I have to contend with people that worked on the remake and people that love that film. And, you know, I don't know if David Packard even, he owns a theater in Palo Alto, and he built a film vault for the Library of Congress. And he's a big film fan, and he restored Meet John Doe and a lot of films. And I'm probably I have 4,000 feature films in my vaults that I've collected ever since I was in the 50s, and thousands of trailers, and I'm going to probably sell him all of those, not to the films that I own the rights to, but to my personal collection, because I can get most of it on DVD. I've seen them 1,000 times, but, man, I have original Technicolor prints of Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind and Citizen Kane and Black and White, and I have every B sci-fi movie ever made. Probably will hang on to those, but if I would relicense that, it just, you know, I just start getting it from every side. So I saw it once. I saw it online, and I didn't think it really mattered. You know, some of those films, they do such. I just didn't think the comments and stuff were of any. I don't know. Maybe
substance?
I missed it. Yeah, were very
humor. Okay.
Funny. I just didn't think that it didn't work on that film, but it might have to some people. It didn't. It didn't really to me. They offered me a lot of money, to be honest with you, to renew it for the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. And my agent, John Poole, at the time, he of course wanted to do it, and I said, "Man," I said, "you know, I'm going to get about 20 or 30 people chewing on me if I do this again, and if I do it at all." And I already had to explain to a number of people, you know, that I did not do this.
I will say this, if you want to hear this. I don't agree with your opinion. However, your stance on it and your rationale makes perfect sense, and it's a movie that I don't think lends itself well to it. I think that it's, like you said, I think I'm guessing if they'd said, hey, we want to do Catwomen on the moon, you wouldn't have had a problem with that.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, and most of them, but that has to be a particular one, very touchy with a lot of people. I'll tell you, there was a lot of criticism on This Island Earth, too.
That was the other one I was going to bring up.
Yeah, lots. There was a lot of people that absolutely was pissed off at Universal for doing that.
The other one is Marooned, that I hear a lot that they did.
I don't know much about Marooned. I have a print.
But you've told me this, you've written this, that you'd love to see you're hoping to have Rocketship XM in 4K restoration soon.
Yeah.
So, do you think a Blu-ray release would happen at some point? And if so, would you like to see special features, a making of the documentary, restoration? Would you like to see special documentaries about the making of Rocketship XM for that release?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about Eye Creatures, because as far as I can tell, your version is the one they did. Now, you re-released the Eye Creatures to TV as Attack of the Eye Creatures, and you gave me a little bit of a preview before we talked, but could you go into that just a little bit?
Okay, Eye Creatures is of course a remake of Invasion of the Saucermen.
Yep.
Susan owns the Saucermen and Zontar and Eye Creatures and all. But before she ended up with those rights, when they I guess AIP split up everything, there were 16 that was shot in 16 millimeter, and there were 16 millimeter prints available around that. I guess out of the big reel, I don't know where I got it. I did get a 16 print. The color was fairly decent on it, and I thought, well, we were doing VHS, we might as well put it out because it's public. There's no copyright notice. In order to get it, I always want to put a copyright on it of some sort, but in order to get a new copyright, you have to change the title or add something to it or make it just a little bit different. But all that new copyright does is protect the changes that you made. It does not protect, the rest of the movie. So that's what a lot of people that own PD films do. They make subtle changes here and there, so hopefully they can deter the 800,000 public domain bottom feeders from ripping it off immediately. I'm not sure we even put that out on VHS. I don't remember the cover.
In doing research, the VHS I saw was called The Eye Creatures, and it had the art from the Crawling Eye poster on it, but I've never seen it.
Okay, that was not from us.
Okay.
We probably didn't put it out.
I don't think so.
I do know that I did copyright it. I'm pretty sure that I did. And anyway, Susan, I didn't know Susan Hart at that point. About the time Kevin Burns hired me to work on biography, and I did a couple of the biographies. I did the hour-long show with Mark Hamill on science fiction. Once was one of the Talking Heads, and then I did the Alice Faye one, and with Hugh Hefner and all that. So, but about that time, we were doing catalogs for our VHS, and we used a picture of Invasion of the Saucermen, the brain guy,
the monster. I don't remember the name. Yeah.
On the cover of the catalog. Well, I get a call from Susan Hart, and I didn't know her. And this is about a month before I went to Fox to do the biography stuff. So she said, "Are you Wade Williams?" I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "Well, I'm Susan Hofheinz, and I own the rights to this Invasion of the Saucermen, and you're using on your brochure our Saucermen." Well, I figured, AAP went out of business and it went off to Paramount, and nobody really cared. Well, she does. She did care. Mm-hmm. And I totally respect that because it's hers. It belongs to her. It's part of the ancillary rights on copyrights. And I said, "Well, Susan, I'm very sorry." I said, "We will not print up any more of the catalogs, and if you want a license, I'll be more than happy to pay you a license." she said, "Well, Mr. Williams, that'll be fine." And we got to talking about things, and I didn't realize that she was the ex-wife of James Nicholson, and we started to find out we had mutual friends. Hell, I didn't know she was starred in Riding the Wild Surf and Dr. Goldfoot, the Bikini Machine, and all that stuff, and so we just sort of became friends, and I told her I was going to be out at Fox in about a month, and she said, well, we'll drive up from Rancho Mirage, and we'll just have lunch. So her husband, Roy, and they drove up, and we met, and we had lunch at Hampton's, one of those places, and just started becoming, good friends. I thought, well, maybe down the road she might want to sell the pictures that she owned to me, since I'm doing it. Well, she hadn't had them very long, and they had people doing bobbleheads illegally, and she sued whoever was making the bobbleheads. And, she's pulling them off of YouTube all the time, and she's sued umpteen people. And she's just one of my dearest friends, and we talk every day or email, and she still has the house she lived in Beverly Hills with a screening room. In fact, she said that the last film they ran that the company made was Master of the World, and she said the print's still in the booth. And I thought, oh my God, her husband, died, and Nicholson died. So I said, Susan, I recopyrighted Zontar way before you even owned it. So I'm going to send you the master, and I'm going to send you the copyright, assignment of copyright on the version that I copyrighted. It doesn't really mean anything. So I said, why don't you talk to your law firm and see if the original script on Saucerman, that doesn't protect Zontar and the other one. And it does. Since it's a remake, it's protected by the plot from the first both those films, so they're really not public domain. They were made in 16 millimeter, and I keep after Susan. I said, you need to release these. And the problem is, people say to me, how come these aren't out? I said, well, you tell me. I've been dealing with first one distributor and then the next. They either don't want to put up any money, or they want you to do this and this and supply this and that, and then they want to take everything out but the kitchen sink on royalties before you ever see any money. It's kind of a dog-eat-dog business, and now with the YouTube wrecking everybody's films where, they don't buy one, they download one, or they get one off the internet, it leaves you kind of high and dry. You've got $1 million library, and nobody will buy it. So that's, a situation that I think it'll all change out. But
in 2010, I'm sure they were talking to you before then, but in 2010, Shout Factory released the first episode that you owned onto home video. How did Shout Factory approach you for the Mystery Science Theater releases on home video?
Which one?
Crawling Eye was first, so I don't know if they came.
That would have been through Corinth Films.
Okay, so they did it. So they licensed it, and then, well, did you have to sign off on it? I mean, clearly you had to.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Now, were you okay? Did they have to do any arm pulling to convince you to license the? No.
No.
You were okay.
Delighted.
Okay. There's all these rumors. I just wanted it out there. Funny enough, I was actually reading a Horror Hound at Barnes & Noble 2 weeks ago, not doing any kind of research, just reading it, and there was an article in there about Rhino home video. And I know you licensed a few of the Ed Wood stuffs through them, and I'm curious if they ever approached you for any of your stuff to ever release the Mystery Science version or Corinth on home video when they owned the rights to Mystery Science.
I think that's when the first licenses were done through them. I believe. I know they were through Rhino.
Okay.
They were through Rhino.
Right.
Because I've got pictures. I'm out in Hollywood. I forget the guy that owned Rhino. He's a pretty famous guy.
Garson Foos?
No.
Foos? No.
No, somebody else. I don't know. It was in the trade papers. He and I are signing the contracts on his desk. Yeah, Rhino was involved in it, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, so many licenses through the past. It's kind of hard to, I know Captain Bijou, the guy that owns that, Bill, forget his name. He has a company called Captain Bijou. He was with Rhino at the time. He sells a lot of public domain.
Richard Emerson?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, then I'm out of names.
This guy was a big. I'll tell you, the guy that I'm trying to think of, he was a big producer of rock and roll records. Big. Very, very well known.
Nothing comes to mind, so. Well,
me either.
Okay. This is purely from a is there interest category. This is not I want you to set aside things like contracts, money. This is maybe not money, but things like are these things tied up. But Rhino Home Video released a couple of the Mystery Science Theater versions of some films that eventually went out of print. These are Teenagers from Outer Space, The Phantom Planet, Women of the Prehistoric Planet, Sinister Urge. And Shout Factory has begun re-releasing some of those old out-of-print episodes, not the ones specifically that you own. Does the idea of re-releasing those episodes appeal to you, of those 4 specifically?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they have to license them. Yeah, I have no problem with those. The big problem I had is, as I go back, I'm chewed up all over with the sci-fi community on Rocketship XM. I mean, it was just... Yikes. I mean, I was surprised. I mean, that's how I found out about it. I didn't know it was on there.
People are going to want me to ask you that because you brought up Susan Nicholson. I know you don't know the answer to this question. This is something that only she could answer, but people will be mad if I don't ask it. Do you think that at some point she will license her films to have the Mystery Science Theater versions of the episodes she owns out there?
On Mystery Science Theater,
yeah,
I never ever talked to her about that. I know she would license her films. I honestly can't say. I'm sure if you paid her enough money, she certainly would. I think she ought to. And I've told her, I don't know how many times, why don't you do a license? With somebody on these pictures, and then, because people just keep stealing them, why don't you do that? And she just, I know, I won't name the distributors. I know 2 or 3 that I put in touch with her, and they always try to kind of be a little slimy about it, and so she's a smart lady. I mean, this gal is brilliant. She's a very conservative. So was her husband. They were Republicans and very conservative. And she's very honest, and she has an idea, I think, of what her films are worth. I think she thinks they're worth a little more, possibly, than they might be. And her. She sued a bunch of people for stealing stuff, and she's got the money to do it. I don't have the throwaway money just to keep suing people because it takes a couple years and it costs a fortune, and you never get your money back. Most of the people are insulated through corporations and or don't have 2 nickels rubbed together anyway. So
just for the sake, you don't know, or you're not sure.
No, I'm not sure. I don't. I doubt it. I think she would want a legitimate.
I know that Shout has offered to get her full library, but again, I don't know if it went any further than that. But outside of saying, is there interest in it? But that I don't know. This is just hearsay.
Well, I wish she would, because I don't know how long DVDs are going to be around. Not that much longer. And I said, Susan, we're at the tail end of the DVD world, like, everything's going to change. I said, you should at least do a license. But see, none of Susan's stuff is on 4K, and it's all in old Beta SP, and, it all have to be done I mean, she's got everything. She's got fine grains, negatives, and Spanish tracks and trailers. She's got everything, in cold storage out there. And I've gone through, everything she's got. And I mean, she should have Saucer Men out, Werewolf, Amazing Colossal Man. They do business, but apparently no one is willing to offer her enough money, because she is well aware that a lot of us are well aware. The money you get up front, you usually don't see much more. So you've got to get your money up front.
Moving on to, we got to start wrapping up because we're getting a little late in the tooth. But I have a list of other films that you have on your website that you own that were featured on Mystery Science, and I'm going to say it just a little brief thought. Maybe I may have a follow up, but just here we go. So we'll start with the Violent Years.
Well, I got that recently from Greg Luce, so I had nothing to do with licensing that.
Ed Wood did write it. I went on a rant about how I'm not sure. You have documentation proving that he did write it. Okay.
That I do.
Now, do you have like scripts? And then I have a follow-up for that, or anything?
I believe I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is because I have a friend who had a theory, and I heard this theory, and I said, well, that makes a lot of sense, which is that more than likely the dialogue that we hear in the movie probably was not written by Ed Wood. It was probably stuff they made up on the spot because his stuff was so bad. Do you think that's...
Yeah.
Think that's a plausibility?
Oh, anything is.
Okay.
They brought Ed Wood in on one, either that or Sinister Urge. I don't think he's in the credits on Sinister Urge, is he?
He's in Sinister Urge. He's not in Violent Years. That's why I was confused if he wrote it or not.
Okay, then it might be Violent Years, because they got an argument. I think I've got some. It's either that or Sinister Urge. I've got a bunch of files, and they got in some arguments with Ed Wood, paid him off, and I think he worked on the scripts, but I don't know. I'll have to pull the files and look at them.
Okay. And we talk a little bit about it, but Sinister Urge, which he wrote and directed, he is in the credits for that one. Any thoughts?
No.
Okay.
Really?
Teenagers from Outer Space.
Well, I bought that from Warner's. That was shelved for many, many years out of Warner's, and I had to have a law firm go in and negotiate with the attorneys there at Warner Brothers, and I ended up buying all the rights to it.
And the next one I have is Attack of the Giant Leeches.
That's I don't own any rights to it. It's public domain.
Okay, and I'm guessing Giant Gila Monster and Killer Shrews are the same.
Those are made down in Dallas, Texas, and those are public domain.
Yeah. What's the story behind First Spaceship on Venus? Do you know
it's public domain.
Okay.
Except I think if Crown wanted to, through the GATT treaty, they could probably perfect the copy, get the copyright back on that.
Okay.
I just don't think they care.
Okay. That would explain a lot. The Phantom Planet.
It's also public domain. I don't know if that was made. Do you know if that was made in the States?
62, directed by with Francis Bushman, who directed it. Dean Fredericks. I think it was made in the States.
If it was made in here, it's public domain. Yeah, I have the fine grains stuff on it. If it was made in England, they could recover the copyright.
I think it was made in the U.S.
Much about it. We released it though. We have wonderful material on it.
Beautiful covers and beautiful art for it.
It is
kind of a cheesy movie, but still. Women of the Prehistoric Planet.
Yeah, well, I bought that. I bought all of Jack Broder's library, all the reel arts, and that Navy versus the Night Monsters, and the negatives are lost. They were out at Deluxe General. I can't find the 35 negatives. Got a bunch of 35 prints and 16s, and then I've got Beta SP Masters from 4-Star that released it before I bought it. And I have actually Deluxe General. We had what you call 16 32 millimeter negatives, what they made 16 prints off of, and they were color, and they would they'd make prints, and then they'd slit them down the center. So you'd have, it was 32 millimeters wide, so they'd put them in a film slitter, and you'd have two prints there. And I've been after the negatives from the time I bought it. I had a letter from the producers over to Deluxe General, and they're still looking for them. They moved a lot of the negatives they weren't using into a warehouse out in Burbank, and they still haven't found the 1632s. And I can go to the 35 stuff that I have, but it's all red, so it would be phenomenally expensive probably to recolor all of it. And the film, I absolutely have no problem, re-releasing all that stuff to Mystery Science Theater.
Okay. Screaming Skull. I know you don't own that one, but it's on your site.
No, I've got 35 material, but I don't own it.
I think MGM owns it. Horrors of Spider Island. Another one that's public domain, but.
I've got 35 material again on it, but I don't own it.
Okay. Hercules and the Captive Women.
I've got Technicolor material on that, but I don't own it.
I think Beta Gambit owns that one. And the Beatniks is one that fascinates me.
Yeah, I've got all kinds of material on that, and it's public domain.
Okay. Directed by Paul.
Actually, the guy that started that at Travis, that movie is Tom Neal's godfather.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, most people are distracted by the fact that it was directed by Paul Frees, including myself. Undersea Kingdom serials, which, again, public domain, but I know you have prints of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got all that stuff I had for years. I've never done anything with them.
And
it's on my website, but everybody's selling them.
And Radar Men from the Moon, I'm guessing, is a similar situation.
Yeah, it's a PD. I've got all 35 stuff on that.
Okay. To wrap up, before I get to the final questions, the people that I want you to ask about, I just want a word. What advice would you have for someone who wanted to be a film licensor or a film distributor, or someone who just wanted to be in the film business in general?
Well, what would you distribute? New films, old films? If you want to be a distributor, most of the old movies, or all of them, have long been bought by me or by other Sony or by other people, looking for materials for use. So there's not a lot of copyrighted material for sale unless, like, a major independent like Kid Parker, he'd probably sell all the Lipperts and probably Alex Kogan a bunch of his stuff, but it's not, there's just not a lot of money in that stuff. I think the thing to do, John Poole at Corinth goes to the Cannes Film Festival every year, and he buys the U.S. rights to films and accessorizes them, makes posters, trailers, and gets reviews on them and distributes them. And he's doing his own videos and DVDs and just set up. Basically, you'd almost just have to set up your own small distribution company. And to get old films, you either have to go and fight the PD market, just go out and buy a bunch of PD, the best possible PD movies, and make dupes off the DVDs and try to make a better carton and try to sell them. But I don't believe there's any money in it, and I don't believe would be worth your while, other than or going to a lot of these. We have a film festival every year over at the theaters here. Is releasing independent films that young filmmakers make digitally now. There's thousands of them out there, and being a distributor for those. But you need to set up, I would think, and I've looked into it a little bit, your own downloading setup and even your own independent digital channel online where you sell and exhibit and stuff like that. Everything is so different than the way it used to be that you could, say if you went to Cannes, I know John paid 10 or 15,000 for some brand new movies for the U.S. It costs you just a bloody fortune to put them on 4K and closed caption and do everything you have to do with them. And if you don't have a hit with one of them, you're really down the tubes. And it's you just have to, it's just something you have to work at. I mean, there's a lot of outlets for this film. You'd probably know more than I would. There's colleges and all kinds of. I think everything is going to be online and digital and sales and all that down the road. Everything's going to be in some type of downloading situation, and people are going to watch everything on devices, really even more than probably television anymore. So I just, it's an all new ball game even for me, and so I don't really what to say. Or start making your own movies and distributing them. I know a lot of Don Doler that I own a picture called Galaxy Invader, and that he made 3 or 4 movies back in Pennsylvania. You just have to play it by ear. I wish I knew. I don't know what I'm doing with my stuff now. I have possibility of licensing. I'm on Turner all the time to start buying some of my pictures. They have, they will. There's just not a lot of money. The economy is so bad right now with the current regime in the White House. The economy is way down. And they even tell me that the film buyers that, it wasn't what it was 10 years ago. So I hope the economy comes back up. So these people can afford to buy something.
I want to end, I've got a list of names, just again, 1 or 2 thoughts, people that you have known, and then a list of distributors and people that you've worked with over the years. But we'll start with Alice Faye, just maybe 1 or 2 brief words, or more if you want.
She was a longtime dear friend. I think she was probably one of the finest song stylists ever in the movies, and certainly gorgeous, and made some just sensational movies like Alexander's Ragtime Band and in old Chicago, and just sent Hello Frisco Hello. She has the most beautiful eyes and Technicolor, and she was just one of the great stars of the business. She's not as well known as Judy Garland and a lot of them, but the lady was one of the finest song stylists ever, in my opinion.
Martin Scorsese.
He is a very, very, very big film buff, very knowledgeable on films. He loves films, and he loves Alice Faye, by the way. And he knows movies. In fact, in one movie he made, he had Alice Faye singing the opening song "You'll Never Know," and he just loves old films. He loves science fiction and posters. He's a poster collector, and he's got a huge personal film library collection stored at MoMA, and he's quite a guy. He's really one of the greats.
The late Frank Capra.
Well, of course, what can you say about Frank Capra? He made some of the finest movies of all times, like sentimental movies a lot, and he gave me some very good advice once. And when making a movie, I tried to get him to come back and direct a movie for me when his last 5 years of his life, and he just wasn't able to. But he loved movies. He was so interested in storytelling, and he told me a very valuable thing. He said, before you start a movie and make a movie, he said, you make it on your desk. And he said, if you're not 100% satisfied when the film is made, on your desk, looking at the script, and if you can't see this film in your mind in every scene, and you're not satisfied with any part of it, don't start it until you got it the way you want it. I'll never forget that. And I love It's a Wonderful Life, and Meet John Doe is a sensational movie. And those are probably my two favorite Capras. I kind of like Lost Horizon. It was my father's favorite. You know, he's made some pretty fantastic films. Actually, he signed a poster on Pocket Full of Miracles. I got a picture of him down in the courtyard down there signing a picture.
Anne Robinson.
One of my dearest friends, absolutely gorgeous. She really, as far as I'm concerned, made the movie The War of the Worlds. She was such a fresh face, and she is just a delightful personality, and just even now she's just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I used her in a movie with Robert Clark, and you know, she's just a stunning, wonderful person and loves movies. She was a stunt girl, and I mean, she was a glamour girl. She was a show girl, beautiful and extremely smart, and loves The War of the Worlds, just absolutely loves it, and you know, went to a lot of the conventions, and so, you know, signed stills, and I mean, that's where they got, of course, you know, the name Sylvia Van Buren. Mm-hmm. That was her name in The War of the Worlds. So
Leonard Maltin.
Yeah, Leonard I haven't talked to in years. You know, he's pretty damn knowledgeable on films. He wrote so many nifty books that reviewed films for television. I guess I got every one of them, you know, through the years. And you know, he's just a big film buff.
Okay, and now moving on to the distributors. I don't know if we'll start with Kit Parker of Kit Parker Films.
Oh, he's been in the business as long as I have. He knows movies. He's a sharp guy, and you know, he distributed some of the AIPs, reissued them on 35 millimeter about 20 years ago because we played them. And yeah, he's been in the business a long time. Honest guy, and very, very nice.
Alex Kogan of Films Around the World.
Alex is one of the great characters of all times. He and I are politically left and right, and we just absolutely enjoy insulting each other from Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton, back and forth. It's one of, you know, if I don't hear from him every day in something insulting about Donald Trump, I have to check, make sure he didn't die. And of course, I reply in kind with Hillary Clinton. Actually, one of my friends called when she had that Elizabeth Warren they were thinking about running with her. She called her. Let's see, Elizabeth Warren. Oh, Liawana and the Chunky Chick. And so I told that to Alex, and he was all insulted. So, yeah.
Susan Nicholson Hart. Susan Nicholson Hofheinz Hart.
Hofheinz. Well, first of all, she's simply gorgeous. She's very athletic. She ice skates all the time. She's extremely wealthy. I don't know how many homes that she has. She lives in Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, and she's very conservative. And her husband's father, I think, designed the stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, their big sports stadium. And you know, she made a lot of movies was involved in the making of a lot of movies with her husband at the time, James Nicholson. Yeah, just brilliant. She's one of the smartest women I've ever met. It really is.
Gregory J. Luce of Sinister Cinema.
Well, he and I had an animosity for many years, or I did, because he would take some of my films and use them, and you know, I forgot about it, and you know, we became friends a long time ago. And he loves movies. He's he's quite a film guy and absolutely loves movies. He's a baseball fan. We've done business together. I bought a lot of his films from time to time that he would sell, and he's put out some incredible reissues of a lot of science fiction pulp books that no one would ever put out, and he was kind of a pioneering in the business of public domain films for the most part.
You told me you didn't even know they were still in business, but I'll ask it anyway. Crown International.
Yeah, I did not think they're in business. I've only met them, he and his wife, and I'm talking a long time ago, when they were actually distributing. I imagine it was probably as far back as in the 60s. They were kind of a mover and shaker, an independent company that they bought films either at film festivals and reworked them for American distribution, which I think that first Spaceship on Venus is where they got it. Yeah. And they were big movers in drive-in, furnishing product for drive-ins. I do not know if they were in the business. I met them at Show-A-Rama. They used to have a big convention here, and Crown was always here, and they always had a big guest suite.
Stephen Rogers of the Peter Rogers Organization, if any contact.
I know the names, but I don't know those people.
Okay. Sam Arkoff and AMC Networks.
I never knew Arkoff. I only have heard stuff about him through Susan, so I can't say much about him.
Okay. Rhino Home Entertainment.
I've done business with Rhino. Very nice people. I really enjoyed. They released most of my library at one time.
And we will end with Jordan Fields and Shout Factory.
Oh, they're very nice. I've known them for a long time, and we've gone back and forth on distribution, and sooner or later, I'm sure we'll be doing some business together. They're out there plugging away, and that's good.
On behalf of one Kansas City kid, thanks for bringing Hollywood to the Midwest.